My name is Chuck, and I graduated from the University of California, Berkeley in 2016. My college experience was fantastic. I was part of a fraternity, managed my academics well, and balanced my time perfectly between studies and dating. I'm still close with many of my fraternity brothers, and I recently got engaged to my fiancée, Rosie, whom I also met at Berkeley. However, if you had asked me about my feelings toward Berkeley as a freshman, my response would have been quite different. What I'm about to share was a significant reason I never felt overly ambitious in high school. The atmosphere at Berkeley was entirely foreign to me, and it was strange being surrounded by so many self-proclaimed high achievers. As a freshman, I quickly became swept up in the frenzy of career planning, as if I was supposed to map out the next 30 years of my life at just 18. It seems silly now, but that was the environment at my school back then. To secure any sort of opportunity in the business world, having a polished LinkedIn profile was essential. I vividly remember the stress of crafting a professional image online, feeling like my future depended on my connections and the skills I listed. Nevertheless, I checked all the boxes and began searching for a summer internship. It wasn't long before my inbox pinged with a meaningful message. To my genuine surprise, a prestigious business firm reached out, expressing interest in my profile. This wasn't one of those generic bot messages. It felt personal, designed specifically for me. I read it over multiple times before finally responding, and after a day of brief correspondence, I was invited to a first-round interview. I spent hours researching the company to prepare for the interview, honing my responses to common questions. Soon, I received a message from a guy named Armand Slowinski. I'll never forget that name. He informed me he would be my interviewer. Naturally, I did some background research on him. However, excitement quickly turned to confusion. I searched LinkedIn for Armand's profile, expecting to learn more about the person I'd soon meet, but strangely found nothing. No professional presence, no social media profiles. I shrugged it off, attributing it to a preference for privacy. Armand and I agreed on a day and time, and he provided me with the interview location. To my surprise, it was a random coffee shop in Oakland. This left me puzzled. Why wouldn't the interview happen in Berkeley, where there were countless suitable coffee shops? The address online appeared normal, so I didn't think much of it. The day before the interview, I told my friend Riley about the situation. He was even more perplexed, saying it sounded suspicious. I agreed, but figured it was worth it for the potential position. He offered to drive me there instead of me taking an Uber, and I accepted. Little did I know that his offer might have saved my life. The next day at 4 p.m., Riley pulled up to my dorm. I was extremely anxious, as this was one of my first interviews. I got into the car, and we headed out. After 20 minutes, I asked Riley to drop me off on the street, not wanting to be seen arriving with a friend for the interview. He offered to wait for me, but I declined, and he smirked, pulling out a large bag of weed from his dashboard. I stepped out, thanked him, and walked a few minutes to the location. I froze in my tracks when I arrived. Standing before me was a construction site. There was no coffee shop in sight. Even stranger, the area didn't seem residential at all. All the buildings appeared abandoned or private. Confused, I double-checked my phone to confirm I was at the right address. The block must have been recently demolished, so recently that even Google Maps hadn't updated. Before I could call Riley, a booming voice called out behind me, "Chuck!" I whipped around and saw an extraordinarily tall man in an expensive-looking black suit. I felt a surge of relief, grateful that this whole situation hadn't turned out to be a setup. His presence was commanding, but oddly out of place amid the derelict surroundings. I also noted that the car he stood beside was a matte black Bentley. He approached me with a confused expression. We shook hands, and when I inquired about the construction site, he said he was just as surprised as I was. Furrowing his brow, he rubbed his chin and said, "You know what? Why don't we find somewhere else? Get in." He gestured toward the Bentley, then climbed into the front seat. Excitedly, I followed him, walking around to admire the car. I couldn't help but glance into the back seat, expecting to see the luxurious leather that's typical of a Bentley. Instead, a chill ran down my spine. Lying flat on the ground in the shadows was a man holding something long and metallic. Panic surged through me. My mind raced with the implications of what lay before me. This was a trap. I turned away from the car and sprinted as fast as I had ever run. I heard the man call my name, but I didn't look back. As I ran, the dreaded sound reached my ears, screeching tires. I stole a glance over my shoulder and saw the car turning around, aiming in my direction. I had to think quickly. There was no way I could outrun a car. The area was a maze of streets, leaving me with little choice. I reached the next intersection and faced a critical decision: left or right. Logic told me to turn left as it was closer, but my feet acted before my brain could process. I darted right and ran down the street, knowing I had only seconds to act. By some miracle, one of the buildings ahead had a fire escape that looked low enough to grab onto. With all my strength, I leaped upward, managing to catch the ladder. I had never done a pull-up in my life, but in that moment, it was life or death. I climbed quickly, and as I reached the top, the Bentley whipped around the corner and stopped in front of the building. I couldn't see the driver, but I knew he was watching me. I had no other options. If they decided to follow me, I'd have to face them. The next minute felt like an eternity as I stayed perfectly still. The car lingered for a while longer before it accelerated down the street, turning left and disappearing from sight. I gasped for breath, pulled out my phone, and called Riley, practically screaming about what had just happened. I remained on the fire escape until he arrived, and we sped away in silence. The aftermath of the whole ordeal was uneventful. I buried it deep in my mind and refused to discuss it, even with Riley. As far as I was concerned, it never happened. Yet there are times like now when I can't help but recall every horrifying detail of what could have been my last day on Earth. This is a recent experience. My family and I were driving to college to help me move in, as I'm currently a freshman. Once we arrived, I discovered that I would be living in a Jack and Jill setup, meaning I would share a bathroom with another room, so I'd be living with 3 other guys. I already knew one of them from orientation, but it's my roommate, Diora, who I want to talk about. I had his social media beforehand, and we exchanged contact details before moving in. I tried reaching out to him on Instagram to get to know him better, but his replies felt lackluster. His profile looked like one of those Discord moderators you see in Instagram Reels or TikTok. Once we moved in, I met him, and ironically, he fit the Discord mod stereotype. He had a slim build, was around my height, looked very pale, and had a patchy mustache. When I tried talking to him, his speaking style matched his texting. He seemed very introverted, stuttered often, and always rushed to end the conversation. I attempted to lighten the mood by asking what kind of music he enjoyed, but he replied that he doesn't listen to music, claiming it wouldn't fill his cup of emptiness. To make things even stranger, when he set up his PS5, he immediately started gaming. It's not the gaming itself that was odd, but rather his behavior while playing. Diora emitted strange grunting noises, violently shook his body, and laughed while spamming the controller. He would also put his feet in his desk cabinet, occasionally grabbing them and pulling them toward himself during these fits. He whispered to himself as he played, either alone or with online friends, often repeating what he said in a giggly manner. He stayed in the room 24/7 and hardly ever did homework. His movements alone freaked me out as I tried to sleep, but that's not all. Sometime during the first week, I went out with some friends I met in my dorm building and returned pretty late, around 1 a.m. Diora appeared to be asleep in his bed, so I brushed it off as I went to my cabinet next to my bed. Suddenly, I felt goosebumps on my arms and an urge to turn around. When I did, Diora was staring at me with a slight grin. I yelped, "Holy shit, Diora, why are you looking at me like that?" He laughed it off and said, "Dark time," then turned to face the wall. This incident happened, I'd say, 3 more times. I tried to transfer out, but the college informed me there were no open dorms. I attempted to switch to the other room, but one of the other roommates refused to leave. This meant I was stuck with Diora for the semester, and I had to deal with it. About 3 months passed, and one day I returned from my English class. When I opened the door to my dorm, Diora stood up in a panic, asking why I was back so early. This was odd, as my English class actually ended late. I asked if he needed the room to himself, and he declined, striking a bizarre pose that resembled something from an anime. He assured me I shouldn't be worried at all. I visibly cringed at his statement, which only made me more uncomfortable. I noticed a box on his desk, and when I asked about it, he insisted it wasn't important. I shrugged it off, but then I realized my iPhone charger and scissors were missing. I asked Diora if he had seen them, and he handed me the scissors, then gave me the iPhone charger. As he handed it over, the cable knocked the box over, causing it to spill its contents. What I saw made my heart drop. A sticky note with my name fell out, along with what looked like a clear case holding eyelashes, a pair of glasses, some of my socks, and a disposable photo of me I had taken as a joke. He scrambled to collect everything from the floor as he tried to explain, but I yelled at him to get out. He left immediately. I texted my RA about the situation, and he told me he was out at the moment, but would come back tomorrow to see the box as evidence for a potential eviction of Diora. I hid the box in my laundry bin, feeling rattled and disgusted by the sight of my roommate. However, an hour later, he returned. I simply told him to stay on his side and not speak to me. After that, there was silence. I tried to stay awake out of fear that he might find the box, but after a long day, I fell asleep around 2 a.m. When I woke up, Diora was gone, and it felt good to see him out of the room for once. But then I remembered the box. I went to my laundry bin, and it was gone. Panic set in, and soon after, my RA knocked on the door. I let him in and recounted the story. While he believed me, he said he couldn't do anything without the box. Otherwise, he would just be acting on my word, which wasn't substantial. I felt like I was losing my mind. The RA left, and about 5 hours later, Diora came back. I asked him what he did with the box. He played dumb, saying, "What box? I don't know what you're talking about." I pressured him to stop pretending, but he kept denying it. I couldn't stand to look at him or be in the same room anymore. Now, it's second semester, and yes, I'm still living with Diora, unfortunately. He did assure me that he would never do anything like that again, and that if he did, he would let me know, so we could move out immediately. I took his word for it, and as of today, we're still roommates. However, I avoid the room as much as I can. He still gives me the creeps. The worst part is that I sometimes can't sleep or focus during the day because I keep thinking about what was in that box. Why did he take my photo? Why did he steal my socks? What were the glasses for? The part that terrifies me each time is what those eyelashes were doing there. And perhaps the strangest thing of all is that he labeled the box with my name. This occurred during my freshman year of college in 2019. I've graduated now, but I often reflect on it. During Halloween week, my college had wild parties every day. I attended a Big Ten school, so there were always fraternity costume parties, and even the bars encouraged dressing up. It got pretty hectic. Lots of alcohol, plenty of police, and unforgettable memories. This event took place on the Saturday of Halloween week after our football team secured a major victory that day. My friends and I planned to celebrate at a specific fraternity off campus. We knew about it because one of my friends, Alexandro, was dating a player on the team. We arrived at the frat party around 11 p.m., and the atmosphere escalated quickly. Everyone was getting drunk fast, and we were chanting against the school we had just beaten while the music blared. I was taking shots and dancing with my friends, having a great time. It's important to note that my phone had died during all this, so I had given it to Alexandro to keep in her purse. Later, I informed my friends that I needed to use the bathroom and asked them to wait for me by the DJ booth. By this point, we were all pretty intoxicated. While I was in the restroom, I heard some frat guy yell, "Cops!" at the top of his lungs, and chaos erupted as people began screaming and scrambling to escape the house. I bolted out of the frat house and was met with multiple police cars and flashing lights. Partygoers were running in all directions. Some officers were already speaking to the frat brothers, while others chased after underage drinkers. In my drunken state, I suddenly realized I didn't have my phone. I started shouting for my friends while trying to avoid the cops, but I knew I wouldn't be able to find them in the crowd. So I decided to make my way home, even though I wasn't entirely sure how to get there. The frat house was quite a distance from campus, in a different area than the other frats. As I began my trek home, I realized it was freezing outside. Even though it was only October, it felt like 37 degrees that night. I was still heavily tipsy but aware of my surroundings. After a while, I knew I needed a break to warm up and hopefully sober up a bit. I spotted a building that resembled one of the academic halls I had heard about, so I approached it, opened the door, and stepped inside. It was fairly dark, but a few exit signs illuminated parts of the interior. After about 5 minutes, I started to feel a bit more sober, but then realized I wasn't in an academic building. I was in a warehouse. While it was warmer, I began to feel anxious about the eerie atmosphere. I tried to leave, but when I pulled on the door, it was locked. How could it have been locked from the inside? I headed toward another door near the exit sign, pushed it open, and walked through, expecting to step outside. Instead, I entered a smaller room lit by a dim red light. There was a buzzing noise from some machine, and I could see chains hanging from the ceiling along with steam filling the space. I kid you not, it looked like a scene straight out of a horror movie. When I turned to go back, I found that door was also locked behind me. Panic set in, and I fought back tears as I slid down the wall, silently crying. That's when I heard it, a door slamming shut and footsteps. I instantly froze, my eyes widening. I heard another door shut, and the footsteps were getting closer. Seeing a door next to me, I quietly opened it and snuck through, navigating between the hanging chains and the steam. I heard the door from the previous room open, and the heavy footsteps approached. My fight-or-flight instinct kicked in, and I spotted a window. With all my strength, I kicked it 5 times until it shattered. That's when I heard the footsteps rushing toward the door. I had maybe 10 seconds to spare. I leapt out of the window without realizing I had fallen about 10 feet to the ground, landing on 2 recycling bins. Shocked by the impact, I pushed myself off and looked up at the window, now shattered, but no one was in the frame. I quickly dashed under some nearby pine trees, hiding in the shadows. When I looked back, I saw a figure peering out the window, searching in all directions for me. My entire body went numb with fear. I quietly crossed the street and ran for my life. I didn't stop until I recognized the side of campus where my dorm was located. When I reached my dorm, my friends were waiting outside, panicked and freaking out. They told me I had been missing for almost 4 hours. The next day, I recounted my experience, and my friends listened with mouths agape. After discussing it further, I discovered the building had been unused for several years. That realization hit me hard. Whoever was in that building wasn't a cop or night security. It was some random person after me. It still makes me feel sick to this day. If I hadn't been quiet or acted quickly, things could have ended very differently. Despite my efforts to find out more about the building, nothing came up. It remains the scariest experience I've ever had.